couple of updates for you guys. Let's see, last week I spent a couple days, 3 days in NorCal working on one of the Surf Air aircraft that had an issue. Thanks, dude.
No problem.
I sold my car, so I'm relying on my trusty 1986 Kawasaki Enduro to get me around. And I towed my first banner. So today we're out in Compton, getting ready to start on an annual inspection. The annual inspection has 3 parts to it. It'd be the airframe, engine, and propeller. So I'm going to get stuff prepared. The first thing I'm going to work on is probably the engine group. So I'll do the engine and the propeller today. It'll probably take me a couple of days to get through this inspection. But in order to start the engine inspection, we need to get it warmed up so we can change the oil, check compression on the cylinders. So I'm getting ready to pull the aircraft out right now. I think I'll have to rearrange the hangar a bit. We'll get the plane pulled out and run the engine. So before I get started on the annual, I'm going to go ahead and print off an annual inspection checklist. I'll do a little bit of research on the aircraft status. Once I've printed off that checklist, we'll go out and gather all the tools and parts that we're going to need because we want to get started on the engine while it's still warm. Basically, anytime you're doing an inspection, the FAA requires that you work from a checklist. The checklist that I'll be using is specific to this aircraft, but it includes all of the FAA required inspection items for an annual. So we'll get that printed off, we'll go gather up our tooling and our parts that we're going to need, and then we'll go out and run the engine. These engines don't have starters installed, so I'm going to have to hand prop the plane. Clear prop. Okay, so that's how you hand prop. We're going to let the engine warm up a little bit here. Then we'll go ahead and do some, we'll do a run up to about 1700 RPM, check the mag drop. We'll turn carb heat on and verify we get a corresponding RPM drop. Check the battery voltage. We'll lean it out a bit and try and burn off any carbon buildup on the plugs. And then after that, we'll check our idle mixture rise. Okay, got the engine up to operating temperature. Everything checks out. Engine run looks good, so we'll get it in, drain the oil, take an oil sample, and do compression checks. So in order to check compression, I've removed all of the leads, the ignition leads, and I've also removed the bottom igniter from all 4 cylinders. We're going to thread this adapter into the bottom igniter port of the cylinder. First we're going to get, we'll start with the number 1 cylinder. We'll get the cylinder to top dead center on the compression stroke, which there's a couple ways to do that. One, with the spark plug out, you can actually visually verify the location of the piston within the cylinder. So once we have it at top dead center on the compression stroke, we're going to use shop air and apply 80 psi of air to the cylinder, and we're going to see what the leak down is on the cylinder. So it's normal for a little bit of air to escape past the valve seats and past the piston rings, but we want to make sure the leak is not excessive. So I've got the number 1 cylinder to top dead center on the compression stroke. I've installed the adapter into the bottom spark plug port, and I've dialed in 80 psi on my pressure test set. So now I'm going to hook up to the cylinder and allow the shop air to flow into the cylinder. Okay, so as you can see, I've got 80 psi going into the cylinder. That would be this gauge here. And then on the gauge to the right, okay, so the compressor kicked on in the middle of that test, so I might have been a little bit hard to hear. We're on to the number 3 cylinder now. The first cylinder checked out at 76/80, which is actually very good. The limit is 60/80. So now I'm rotating the engine through to the next cylinder in the firing sequence, which is cylinder number 3. And we're gonna get cylinder number 3 to top dead center, and then we'll repeat the test on that cylinder. We've got 80 PSI of shop air dialed into our pressure regulator, and we're slowly going to pressurize the cylinder. So here again, if you see the regulator, we've got 80 PSI going into the cylinder, and the cylinder is holding about 74 PSI. So again, that's a good test, very minor leakage through the cylinder. So we'll go ahead and repeat this test for all 4 cylinders. This engine's only got about 30 hours on it since overhaul, and so we're expecting pretty good compression results. They will get a little bit better as the engine continues to break in, and then they'll slowly deteriorate over time as the engine wears. The limit is 60 PSI, so 60/80 is our limit. Basically, anything more than 60, a bigger drop than 20 PSI, so if we have less than 60 PSI staying in the cylinder, that tells us we've got excessive blow-by. So either the valve seats are worn or the valves are worn and they're not seating fully, or the piston rings have either rotated and are allowing air past, or they're excessively worn. With excessive blow-by, you'll have increased oil consumption and reduced engine power. This is something we do to kind of monitor the health of the engine. Once that compression starts getting down towards 60 and below 60, we need to start doing some troubleshooting to figure out what the cause of the compression leak is. And again, the compression test is one of the first things we do during a 100-hour or an annual, because we want to get our compression test results with the engine warm. If we were to do this with a cold engine, we'd get poorer compression results. And the reason for that is once the pistons have all heated up, they seal better within the cylinder. Really everything, once the engine's up to operating temperature, it's warmed up and expanded, and the running tolerances are a bit closer. Okay, so next up we're going to drain the oil from the engine and collect an oil sample for analysis. We send the oil, a small sample of the oil, out to a lab that does a spectral analysis on the oil, and it'll tell us what type of metal particulates are in the engine. I'm going to make a note on the paperwork that this engine was recently overhauled. Since it is breaking in, there will actually be increased metal content in the oil. Okay, that fitting was beyond tight. Here's what I came up with to break the torque on it. I used this Ford wrench, which it's got teeth on it, so it damaged the fitting. I stuck that into the end of this. This is from a jack. This is the pump arm for a jack. And I just stuck this right in the end of it like that, and then used that to give me leverage to break the torque on that fitting. Like I said, it damaged the fitting just because of the teeth on the wrench. You can see the fitting's all chewed up now. But I didn't have a lot of options on getting that off. And I'm not really worried about the damage to that because I'm going to be replacing it anyways. I've got a quick drain fitting here that I'm going to install. That way the next person who changes the oil on this doesn't need to go through what I just did. Okay, so we drained the oil, changed out the oil filter. Now we're servicing the engine with 100 weight mineral oil. We're going to continue using the mineral oil until the 50-hour break-in period is over. Got the quick drain installed. Now I'm going to go ahead and safety wire that. I'll safety the oil filter, and then we'll move on probably to the spark plugs. We'll clean and gap the spark plugs. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and clean and gap the spark plugs. What we're looking at, basically we're going to clean all this gunk off of the threads and then clean the inside of the spark plug. And once we have it sufficiently clean, we're going to set the gap between the center electrode and the outer electrode. Also, we're going to inspect both ends of the spark plug for any cracks in the insulation or any other kind of damage. After we've set the gap on the plugs, we're going to go ahead and spark check them. So we'll actually use a test rig to spark each plug and make sure it's got a good healthy spark. So here we have the sandblaster that I'm going to use to clean these spark plugs. Basically, you take the spark plug and you put it face down or electrode down into this side, and then I'm going to hook up shop air and push on this button on the side, and it's going to blast a sand solution into the spark plug, and that should clean up any debris that's on there. These plugs have only been installed for about 30 hours, so there's not a lot of, they're not really in bad shape, but as part of the annual inspection, we're still going to clean them, gap them, and spark check them. Alright, now that I've got the spark plugs all cleaned up, I'm going to go ahead and finish getting any kind of carbon buildup that might be around the electrode. I'll get that out, and then we'll go ahead and set the gap on them and spark check them. Okay, so now that I've cleaned the spark plugs and inspected them, we're going to go ahead and set the gap. We set the gap between 19 thousandths and 21 thousandths of an inch, and I use this go no-go gauge in order to do that. So it's got little pins that stick out here that are a different diameter from each other. And so what we're going to do, we're actually going to set them closer to 19 thousandths, since as the spark plugs wear, that gap will open up. And this is the tool I use to set the gap, so I'll show you how this works. Basically, I turn this screw out and take this collar here, and I'm going to go ahead and thread it onto the spark plug. Once that's threaded onto the spark plug, I'll insert the spark plug like so into the fixture. And then as I drive this screw down, it's going to actually press on the outer electrode and bend it towards the center electrode. And as I'm doing this, I'll stop periodically to check the gap, see if I've gotten it tight enough. So you can see if I were to continue spinning this screw in, it's going to press that outer electrode down towards the center electrode. And that's how we set the gap. So we'll do that to all 8 spark plugs, and then we'll test them over on the test rig. All of our spark plugs have been cleaned, inspected, and the gaps have been reset on them. Now we're going to use this spark plug tester. Basically what this tool does is it's got shop air going into it, and we're going to thread the spark plug in here, and then we'll increase the pressure inside the box. The reason this is done under pressure is because we want to simulate the running conditions of the spark plug, so obviously there's pressure within the cylinder, and it takes more energy for a spark to jump under a pressurized atmosphere. So what we're going to do is we're going to increase the pressure, then we'll drop this contact against the electrode, and then we'll press the test button, and basically the spark plug will spark, and we'll look down in here. We should be able to see a reflection. Since the plug's going to be pointing straight down in here, we're going to look for a reflection down there, and that'll show us that the spark plug is testing out okay. That's pretty much it. We do that for all 8 spark plugs, and then we'll go ahead and put some anti-seize on them, and we'll reinstall them in the engine and torque them down. I like to get them installed as quickly as possible. That way we minimize the risk of any kind of foreign objects making their way into the engine. When you're installing the new gaskets on the spark plug, it's important to pay attention. There's one side of the gasket that is flat. I don't know if you can tell, but this surface is flat, and this surface is slightly rounded. So we're going to put this rounded surface up against the spark plug, just like so, and the flat surface will be what's pressing up against the cylinder wall, or the outside of the cylinder. Alright, so I think that's going to be all I filmed for today. I got a lot more work to do on the engine, and my SD card and the camera's getting pretty full, so let me know what you guys think about videos working out here on the general aviation type aircraft versus the stuff I film over at Surf Air. It's a lot different out here. I'm usually the only one working, and so it gives me a little bit more time to show you all what's going on, but in general, it's a very different job and a different feel all around. So let me know what you think about it, and I'll try and get you posted with the airframe side of the inspection tomorrow. Okay, that fitting is way tight. I'm gonna use a look around the shop, see if I can find something to use as a breaker bar on it.